Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Midnight Murmurs, where dreams melt into shadows and stories float through your sleep, videos to fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment, letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying tonight's tale, The House That Dreamed. Let's begin. Whispers from Room 217. They said the Grand Elmridge Hotel had been standing for nearly a century, its bones old with secrets and its walls soaked in silence that crept into the cracks of your dreams, and tucked within its long, carpeted halls and flickering antique chandeliers was Room 217, a room they never advertised, a room whose number plaque had faded just enough to look like a mistake, whose key hung alone behind the counter in a drawer that rarely opened, except when the air outside smelled like coming rain and the elevator groaned a little longer than it should have between the third and fourth floors. And on such a night, a man named Elliot checked into the Grand Elmridge, a man who had traveled far, not for business or pleasure, but to rest, to escape the never-ending hum of his city life, the ache behind his eyes, and the exhaustion that no amount of sleep ever cured. And he hadn't chosen the hotel by name, but by feel. It had simply drawn him in, rising from the fog like it had been waiting for him, with its dark oak front desk and a bell that echoed too loudly in the marble lobby. And the receptionist, an older man with eyes like clouded mirrors, had tilted his head just slightly as Elliot approached, as if recognizing him from somewhere he couldn't quite place, but offered no words beyond the quiet slide of the registration book and the question, "How many nights?" To which Elliot replied, "Just one, I think." And the man paused again before opening the drawer, fingers hovering over the keys, then selecting one brass key on an aged keychain that read simply 217, placing it gently into Elliot's palm without comment, though his hand lingered just a beat too long, as if silently asking if he was sure. But Elliot, too tired to care, thanked him and took the key upstairs, not noticing the way the receptionist's eyes followed him until the elevator doors closed with a soft sigh, nor the way the old man reached slowly beneath a desk to mark something in a small leather book with a spine that cracked like brittle leaves, and the elevator, with its velvet walls and low golden light, creaked upward, hesitating briefly as it passed the third floor, the flicker of floor numbers blinking once, then settling. And when Elliot stepped into the fourth floor hallway, it smelled faintly of lavender and mildew, like an old woman's forgotten perfume, and the carpet was patterned with faded roses, their petals curling at the edges like they had withered right into the weave. And Room 217 waited at the far end, its door slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry or was still inside. But Elliot, not easily spooked and far too exhausted to care, pushed it open with a casual hand and found a room untouched by modern time, its wallpaper pale gold with small feathered cracks, the bed a four-poster thing of dark wood and silence, the windows draped with heavy curtains that blocked out even the memory of the outside world, and a single lamp lit the space in a soft amber haze, casting long shadows across the floral carpet, the kind of light that made everything feel like a memory. And Elliot set down his bag, ran a hand through his hair, and exhaled, feeling a calm settle over him, a quiet so deep it was almost sacred. And as he sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress neither soft nor hard but simply there, he noticed something odd, not frightening, just strange. There was a low sound beneath the quiet, not the hum of electricity or the groan of old pipes, but something softer, like the sound of paper being turned very slowly, or fabric brushing against the floor, a sound that faded the moment he focused on it, only to return when he looked away. And though he told himself it was the building settling or his own tired mind conjuring things, he couldn't deny the way the air in the room felt. Aware, as if it was paying attention to him, not malicious, not welcoming either. Just aware. And when he finally lay down, letting his eyes close against the slow pull of exhaustion, the whispering began. Not loud, not even fully words, but soft, breathy threads of sound that curled around the edges of sleep. Not enough to alarm, just enough to keep him floating between waking and dreaming, where thoughts lost their shape and voices from nowhere began to hum memories that weren't his. And in one moment, just before sleep took him fully, he heard it, clear, close. A voice not his own, but not entirely unfamiliar either, whispering from the corner of the room. "You came back," followed by silence so thick it pressed against his skin, and he didn't move, didn't open his eyes because some part of him already understood that room 217 did not wake those who slept in it. It kept them dreaming, and some dreams never let go. When Elliot awoke, it was still dark, not the kind of night dark that ebbs and flows with moonlight, but the thick, unmoving black of a space that forgot time. And for a moment he wasn't sure he had truly woken up at all, because everything felt too still, like the pause between inhale and exhale. And as he blinked into that heavy darkness, trying to remember where he was, he realized something was different. He wasn't lying the same way he had fallen asleep. He was turned slightly, arm draped over the other side of the bed, as if someone had nudged him in the night and he'd rolled toward them, and his heart gave a small, uncertain flutter. Not of fear exactly, but of recognition, like when a dream brushes too close to memory, and he sat up slowly, letting the sheet fall into his lap with the soft rustle of cotton, and listened, really listened. And there it was again, that whispering, not loud, not frantic, but patient, like a lullaby being hummed from the corner of a nursery where no child slept. And the sound came not from one place, but many, like it was soaked into the walls, breathing through the wallpaper. And for the first time, Elliot noticed the wallpaper properly. It was patterned with long, pale vines and tiny leaves, almost like veins, and he was sure they hadn't been there the night before, or at least not in that shape, not in that way that made them look like they were slowly moving, not visibly but subtly, like they were just a frame behind the motion. And as he stood, bare feet sinking into the deep carpet, the whispering stopped. Not all at once, but as if the room was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. And Elliot moved to the curtains, heavy as winter coats, and parted them only slightly, expecting city lights, maybe the glow of distant traffic. But outside was nothing. No street, no trees, no stars, only a vast velvet blackness that felt less like night and more like absence. And the window glass was cold, but not from outside. It was the kind of cold that came from within, like the window itself was withdrawing, and he let the curtain fall back, heart now tapping gently in his chest. Not panicked, just cautious, and turned slowly back toward the room, where the lamp still glowed its sleepy amber, casting shadows that no longer seemed passive, but curious. And it was then he noticed the small table near the armchair in the corner, the one he didn't remember seeing before, with a book upon it, a thick leather-bound volume with no title, just a strange symbol pressed into the cover, like a sun with too many rays. And as he approached, the air grew colder, not biting but intimate, like a cool hand resting on the back of his neck. And when he opened the book, It did not begin with a preface or chapter, but with a sentence. "We dream you when you sleep here," followed by lines of text in a handwriting that changed every few pages, some spidery and neat, others frantic and jagged. And as he flipped through, he saw names, dates, fragments of dreams, descriptions of whispering voices, of shadows that lingered too long, of reflections that moved when the dreamer did not. And scattered among them were lines repeated again and again, in different hands but with identical words. Room 217 remembers. You don't check out, you wake up somewhere else. If you hear your own voice whisper, don't answer. And as Elliot read, he felt the air shift behind him, like someone was reading over his shoulder, breath brushing faintly against his ear. And though every instinct told him not to look, not to turn around, he did slowly and found the room empty as before. Except now the bed was neatly made again, pillows fluffed, sheets tucked, no sign of his previous sleep. And on the pillow closest to the window was something small and pale, a key, not the brass one from the lobby, but a thin silver thing with a tag that read lower level. And though he hadn't noticed any lower floors, hadn't seen any button in the elevator marked that way, he suddenly knew. Somewhere in the hotel there was a way down, and whatever was below room 217 had been waiting for someone who could hear the whispers and still listen. And Elliot, against every piece of logic, every echo of caution in his mind, felt something inside him lean toward that key. Not out of bravery, but familiarity, like he had been here before, like he had left something behind that could only be found by going deeper. And as he reached out to take the key, the book on the table snapped shut by itself, a soft thump that felt louder than it should have in the still room. And from the wall nearest the door, a whisper slithered free again, softer now, almost kind. "You know where it is. You just forgot." And Elliot, key in hand, turned back toward the hallway, unaware that the vines in the wallpaper were slowly inching their way closer to the doorframe, curling tighter, thicker, almost like they were listening too. The hallway outside was no longer how Elliot remembered it. The wallpaper was the same dull olive green, the light still dim and humming, but there was a quiet stretching to the silence now, like time itself had loosened, and the space between each sound felt swollen, elongated, and as he stepped forward, key clutched tightly in his hand, he noticed the numbers on the doors weren't in order anymore. 215 was followed by 304, then 119, then 217 again, though he had just left it behind, and as he turned to check, the door behind him had no number at all now, just a smooth brass surface that reflected nothing. And he realized the hotel was changing around him, subtly but deliberately, rearranging itself like a dream, shifting scenes without warning. And he continued walking, careful not to breathe too loud, listening to the soft murmur that still pressed from the walls. And at the far end of the hall, where there had only been a dead end before, there was now an old wooden door, darker than the others, its paint chipped and peeling in places, and on it was engraved a simple plaque that read, "Lower level, staff only," though the metal was tarnished, almost rusted, and he slipped the silver key into the lock and felt it turn with surprising ease, the click echoing down the corridor like a whisper waking up. And when he opened the door, a long stone staircase led downward, disappearing into a dense, velvety black, the kind that didn't recede when you blinked. It absorbed, and Elliot hesitated only a moment before stepping through, the door closing behind him with a soft finality, and the whispering stopped. At first there was nothing but darkness, the kind that made you feel blind even when your eyes were open. And Elliot let his hands skim along the rough stone wall, the air cooler now, damper, filled with the scent of old wood and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. And as he descended, he felt the pressure of the hotel above him lessen, not disappear, but stretch upward like a memory, and finally, a dim orange glow appeared ahead, flickering gently like candlelight, and he emerged into a wide underground hallway, lined with mirrors on both sides, each one tall and thin, framed in ornate gold or tarnished silver, but all covered in a light film of dust that didn't quite hide the reflections. And as Elliot moved forward, he noticed that in every mirror, the reflection lagged a moment behind him, as if his movements were being watched and mimicked by something just slightly delayed. And then, in one of the mirrors near the end, he saw something different. Not his own form, but a silhouette standing still, watching, tall and featureless, shrouded in a faint blur as though viewed through water. And when he stopped to face it directly, it didn't move, didn't vanish. It just tilted its head slowly, curiously, and Elliot moved on, faster now, until the corridor ended in another door, smaller, older, with a handle worn smooth from use, and carved into the wood were tiny names, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, etched in hurried hands, some neat, some frantic, and one of them, near the bottom, freshly carved, read, Elliot. He paused, the silence so deep now it seemed to hum, and opened the door to a low, narrow room that smelled of smoke and forgotten paper, and along the walls were shelves filled with books that bore no titles, just numbers, and a small table sat in the center with a single candle flickering steadily. And on the table another book lay open, this one newer than the others, its pages blank except for the top line, The Room Dreams You. Back. And suddenly the whispering returned, louder now but still soft, like a choir just beneath the floorboards. And Elliot could feel it pressing gently at his thoughts, trying to pull memories to the surface. Things he didn't remember forgetting, like a face he used to see in dreams, or a voice that once called him by a different name. And as he sat at the table, the candlelight danced across the walls, and the room felt warmer somehow, almost like it was breathing with him, and a pen appeared on the table without sound, just lying there now, waiting. And Elliot picked it up, hand moving without knowing why, and began to write. Not a story, but a memory, one he didn't recognize, of a boy waking in a different hotel long ago, hearing whispers that led him down a staircase that didn't exist by day, and of a door that only opened when you were ready to listen. And as he wrote, the book seemed to absorb the ink, the words sinking deeper into the page, vanishing almost as soon as they appeared, as if the hotel itself was reading and remembering. And a sudden shiver passed through him, not cold but knowing, because he realized this room had seen many like him. Many who wandered down after hearing whispers, many who wrote and then vanished into the folds of the hotel like forgotten dreams. And as he stood to leave, the candle extinguished itself, the light snuffed with a breath that didn't belong to him, and from behind the shelves came a soft creaking, like footsteps dragging lightly across old floorboards. And a voice whispered, low and intimate, "You've written your place. Now find your room." And the door behind him creaked open once more, revealing not the corridor he came from, but a hallway carpeted in red, lined with closed doors, each one marked with a number that flickered softly, as if alive. Elliot stepped into the red-carpeted hallway, its silence more profound than any he had known. Not the absence of sound, but a presence of quiet, dense, heavy, and alive, as if the air itself was listening to him breathe, and the soft flicker of the golden numbers on each door pulsed with an unseen rhythm, like the heartbeat of the hotel itself. And as he walked, he passed rooms marked 223, 105, 302, none in order, none familiar, but each one seemed to watch him, as though behind every closed door was a pair of eyes waiting. And then he reached the end of the corridor and saw it again. 217, the number glowing faintly on a door that hadn't been there moments before, and his hand moved toward the handle without permission, his breath shallow, his heart beat a quiet drum in his ears. And as he touched the knob, the whispering rose again, this time layered, dozens of voices overlapping in tones that weren't quite human, but weren't inhuman either. And he stepped inside, into the room he thought he had left, but now it was different. The bed was gone, the window bricks shut, and the walls were lined with tall mirrors like the corridor he had passed. But each reflection in this room showed not him, but fragments. His shoulder, his hand, the back of his head, but never his face. And behind each piece he could see faint shadows moving independently of his own motion. And as he turned in slow circles, trying to understand, a sound filled the room. Not a whisper now, but a soft lullaby played on a warped music box, slightly off-key, nostalgic and broken. And on the far side of the room, near a fireplace long extinguished, a child's chair sat facing the wall, and something about it felt wrong, not for what it was, but for what it wasn't. Empty, yet not, still, yet pulsing with unseen breath. And Elliot approached slowly, the air around the chair thickening like syrup, and as he stepped beside it, he saw carved into the wood, "For those who listen." And suddenly the walls began to breathe, the wallpaper rippling like skin, and every mirror began to fog from the inside, as though something within was trying to press through. And Elliot took a step back, but the room had no door now, no escape, just the song, the shadows, and the mirrors. One of them cracked softly, just a hairline fracture, but it spread like a spider's web across the glass, and behind it, something began to move, a figure tall and faceless, like the one he had seen in the underground corridor, but now closer, more real, and its hand pressed against the mirror from the inside, fingers long and delicate, tapping once, twice, and then the mirror fell inward like water, rippling without breaking, and the figure stepped through, silent as breath, and Elliot couldn't move, not frozen in fear but held, as though the air around him had decided to stop letting him choose. And the figure stood before him, its head tilting in that same curious way. And though it had no eyes, he could feel its gaze burrow through his skin, and it raised its hand slowly, not in threat, but in invitation. And the moment Elliot touched its palm, the mirrors shattered, not into shards, but into moments, memories, pieces of time flung into the air like snow. And each one showed something from his life, his mother humming in the kitchen, a shadow under his childhood bed, the night he first heard whispers in his dreams, and the face of the woman he had forgotten he once loved. The figure stepped back and disappeared, not walking away, but folding into the air like paper burning in reverse, and the room dimmed, the song slowing, becoming just a single note stretched too thin, and the fireplace behind him roared to life suddenly, its flames tall and blue, and in it a figure sat, another Elliot, older, tired, writing in a book identical to the one from the underground room. And when it looked up, its face was his, but hollow-eyed, and it whispered, "You remember now, don't you?" And Elliot found himself nodding, though he didn't know what he was agreeing to, only that everything felt like it had happened before. That room 217 was never meant to be just a place, but a memory loop, a space of forgotten truths circling endlessly until understood. And the flames consumed the seated figure silently, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared, and Elliot stood alone once more. The mirrors began to pull themselves together, not from the floor but from the air, pieces floating like dust in reverse, and the room started to hum with a sound like breathing through walls, and the bed reappeared. The chair turned to face him, and the door silently returned to its place. And when Elliot opened it, the hallway outside had changed again. Not red carpeted now, but lined with hanging portraits of people he didn't know, but somehow recognized. And each one looked at him with eyes too real to be paint. And as he passed, some blinked. Others smiled faintly, but none spoke. And at the end of the hall, a staircase led upward, curving slowly into a dome of flickering light, and he climbed it one step at a time, feeling each footfall echo not just in the stairwell, but in his chest, like climbing into memory itself. And when he reached the top, he found himself standing in the hotel lobby again, but empty, abandoned, frozen in a moment too still. And through the tall windows he saw only night, but not the kind that followed sunset, the kind that existed behind closed eyes, thick and eternal. Then he heard it, his own name, whispered not aloud, but through the walls, the floor, the very air. And it wasn't a call, but a reminder that room 217 still waited, not behind, but ahead. Elliot stood in the middle of the abandoned lobby, the soft ticking of an unseen clock echoing somewhere high above in the chandeliers, a sound that didn't match any visible timepiece. And as he looked around, he realized everything in the hotel now felt slightly stretched, as if reality itself had been pulled too thin, like old wallpaper peeling at the corners. And the whispers were no longer distant. They lived in the architecture now, murmuring behind velvet curtains, beneath the marble tiles, through the cracks in the chandelier glass. And each whisper seemed to know his name, his memories, his forgotten nights. Like the hotel had peeled his past open and studied it while he slept. The check-in desk stood empty, dust-free but ancient, and behind it, the key rack held only one item, a black string tied to an old brass key labeled simply "Below." And when Elliot touched it, the lights dimmed as though the building itself flinched. And from the far side of the lobby, a corridor opened that hadn't been there before, its carpet a deep green, its walls lined with gas lamps that flickered even though there was no wind. And Elliot stepped forward, clutching the key, drawn not by curiosity now, but by obligation, as though he was no longer a guest here, but part of the staff, part of the story. And as he walked, the air thickened, the ceiling sloped downward, and a door at the end awaited, carved with symbols he did not recognize but somehow understood. A language older than words, something remembered only in dreams. And when he opened it, he was no longer in a hallway, but a grand subterranean hall that stretched endlessly in both directions, filled with rows and rows of doors, each marked with a single number, glowing faintly. He passed room 8, then room 44, Then room 1111, the numbering impossible, non-linear, as if each door led to a different layer of thought. And as he moved deeper, the air became colder, not in temperature, but in memory, like he was walking through old regrets frozen in time. And then, in the center of it all, stood room 217 again, but older now, darker, pulsing slightly as though it breathed, and the brass plaque on the door had changed. Now it read, Last Entry, and Elliot knew, without knowing how, that stepping through this version of the room meant more than curiosity, that what waited inside was not meant to be understood, but accepted. He entered. The room was vast, cathedral-like, with no walls, just space, and the floor was made of mirror-like water that didn't ripple as he stepped across it. And above him, instead of a ceiling, hung thousands of tiny chandeliers, each containing a memory from his life, flickering like candle flames, some warm and others cold. And he saw himself as a child again, standing alone in a hallway, not unlike this one, listening to whispers behind a locked door, and his mother's voice echoing, "Not that room, Elliot." And he never remembered why, until now, when the door in the memory creaked open on its own, revealing darkness and soft breathing within. And suddenly the chandeliers above began to go out, one by one, and the mirror water below rippled with soft footsteps that were not his own. He turned and saw them, figures, dozens, faceless and tall, emerging silently from the horizon of this dreamlike room, each holding a candle, each wearing what looked like hotel uniforms, long decayed. And one stepped forward, its mouth invisible but its voice everywhere, whispering, "You've returned." And Elliot asked, barely able to form the words, "What is this place?" And the figure responded, "This is the house that dreamed. You are inside its memory, and it is inside yours." And Elliot understood in that moment that this hotel was never real in the way buildings are real, that it had always existed in forgotten corners of people's sleep, feeding on memories too heavy to carry, too dangerous to leave behind. And that room 217 was the door between forgetting and remembering, the place where truths were kept and returned when the dreamer was ready. The figures parted, revealing a massive book floating above the water, its pages slowly turning, and Elliot recognized it, the dream ledger, the same one the man in the fireplace had been writing in. And on its open page was his name, written in neat black ink, followed by a line he had never written himself. "Elliot stays." And as he stepped toward the book, something inside him resisted, a final part not ready to remember everything, not ready to accept that he had been here before, that he had walked these halls in sleep and wakefulness, always circling back, always forgetting, until now, when the house called him back completely. The chandeliers flickered violently, shadows circling above like birds preparing to land, and the mirror water began to shatter with each step he took, the dream world collapsing not in violence but in sorrow, a soft unraveling of something old and sacred. And the figures began to hum a soft, funereal song, wordless but not emotionless. And Elliot placed his hand on the book and whispered, "I remember." And as he did, the hotel sighed, not in relief or sadness, but something deeper, something eternal. And the room dissolved into mist, the last thing visible being the number 217 burning faintly in the fog. Then silence, just breath, just sleep, just the end of one memory and the beginning of another. There was no sound, no sense of time, just a stillness that wrapped around Elliot like a thick velvet blanket. And when he opened his eyes, he was lying once again in room 217, the original room, or maybe a version that came after all versions, where the walls no longer whispered but simply breathed, rising and falling like lungs exhaling centuries of silence, and he could no longer tell if it was night or day. Only that the soft glow from the table lamp now pulsed with something deeper than electricity, something like memory or dreamlight, and everything felt slower, heavier, like the very air was made of forgotten lullabies and sleep-soaked sighs. He sat up, noticing that the key was gone, the book was gone, the shadows gone, but not truly gone, only waiting, just out of reach, like ripples waiting for someone to disturb still water again. And the window, which had always shown darkness, now shimmered with a silver fog, where outlines of the hotel's corridors floated like memories half remembered, drifting in and out of view. And Elliot felt no fear now, only a weightless awareness that he had crossed something invisible, a threshold that could not be uncrossed. And though he tried to stand, his legs moved slowly, as if underwater, his body obeying but not eagerly, like it too was unsure what was real anymore. He walked to the door of the room, half expecting it to be locked. But when he touched the doorknob, it turned with a soft sigh, and beyond it, instead of the hallway, was a forest covered in fog, trees growing where walls should be, their bark carved with names, thousands of names, some glowing faintly as if lit from within. And Elliot walked, barefoot on soft moss, no wind, no birds, only the distant sound of pages turning, always turning. And he realized the hotel was not just a building, it was a place within people, within him, and it had roots like these trees, deep and ancient, stretching through generations of sleepers who had unknowingly stepped through its doors in their dreams. A wooden bench appeared beside a crooked lamppost that glowed without fire or bulb, and on the bench sat a man, no face, no age, only the outline of a person who looked somehow familiar, as though made of Elliot's own thoughts. And the figure patted the bench softly, inviting him to sit. And when Elliot did, the fog before them parted just slightly, revealing glimpses, memories not just from his life, but from others who had come before, some laughing, some weeping, some standing in fire-lit ballrooms, others whispering secrets to cracks in the walls, and all of them had entered room 217 in one way or another, and all of them had left pieces of themselves behind. The man beside him finally spoke, and though the mouth did not move, the voice was clear and warm and impossibly ancient. You've walked the spiral far, Elliot, deeper than most, and now comes the choice. And Elliot asked, what choice? Though part of him already knew, and the man turned toward him and said, you may return, forget, and wake up with only the sense of a strange dream. Or you may stay and listen and keep the story safe, as others have before you. And Elliot felt the pull of both options, one leading back to warm sheets and morning light, the other into endless corridors and whispering trees. He closed his eyes and felt room 217 beating inside his chest like a second heart. He chose, and then he awoke. In his apartment, morning light pouring through the curtains, birds chirping faintly, the kettle whistling in the kitchen as if no time had passed at all. And for a long moment he sat there in bed, unsure if he had truly dreamed, or if he had returned from something older than dreaming. And when he stood and walked to the mirror, he found something strange. On his collarbone, faintly glowing in the early light, was a single number, just beneath the skin, softly, like a whisper in a dream, like the house remembering him, even now, even still.